When you think of the supervillain Bane, what exactly is it that you think of? Do you think of this big, bulking brute? Perhaps this majorly massive mammoth, this drugged up and disgusting dominator? Well, if this is the version of Bane that comes to your mind, then I hate to tell you that this version of Bane is completely wrong. Yeah, I know, there may be this one definitive version of Bane that may stand out in your mind, but it's a disgusting version that I can't necessarily see myself getting behind. Sure, Bane is this destructive monster who absolutely values his venom, but he's a lot more than that. In the mainstream version of Bane that, in my opinion, depicts this character the best is in The Dark Knight Rises. Hey guys, my name is DJ, and Bane is one of those complex characters that, according to a mainstream audience, has seemingly lost all of his complexity. Bane, for some strange reason, has almost been universally accepted as, well, nothing more than a big, dumb, and hulking brute, where he is actually a lot more interesting than that. And, I mean, I guess I understand the underlying focus on just Bane's physical stature. After all, for some strange reason, popular media loves to depict the biggest and strongest guy in the room as somehow the dumbest. Now, clearly, I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, but that has definitely become a popular narrative over the years. We watch as the smarter, faster, and smaller hero takes down their massive and idiotic counterparts, and the Bane versus Batman dynamic has sort of become an example of this trope. But to me, Bane is just so much more than that. Bane's power never lied with the stuff in his veins, but rather the destructive and horrifying thoughts in his head. While Bane has become a character that is almost always portrayed to be just this hulking brute that I mentioned earlier, to me, his most dangerous attributes are his intelligence and expert tactical skill. I mean, just think about it. What is more interesting? A character that only offers his enemy a power disadvantage? Or a villain that not only has the knowledge to use that power, but also to use his own craftiness to succeed? And that's the main thing that drives me completely up the wall about most popular depictions of Bane. Sure, maybe it's an image created because of Bane's portrayal in the more popular Arkham games. Sure, maybe it's the really weirdly green and massive portrayal of Bane in the Batman and Robin movie. Sure, maybe it's his vibrant and memorable depiction in 2004's The Batman cartoon. However, to me, these depictions have always left me wanting just a little bit more. Which is why I absolutely love Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Instead of Bane feeling like just another knucklehead McSpazatron, The Dark Knight Rises depicts a version of Bane that showcases his incredible mind for strategy and values his intelligence among all else. Now, before I get to this next section, I just want to say that, well, to be honest, I'm not necessarily one of those guys who just loves to continuously compare things to the comics. Sure, I've done it a handful of times on this very channel, but I really believe that having a unique version of a character can be a good thing if it helps the overall story and creates a more interesting narrative. But when it comes to Bane, this really isn't the case most of the time. That is, of course, until we look at Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. Hell, let's just compare that version of Bane in The Dark Knight Rises to the version we see in his first ever comic book, Vengeance of Bane. And when looking at the comparison, it's very obvious that they definitely leaned into this comic book specifically as inspiration for the Bane character in The Dark Knight Rises. Both versions of Bane depict him born in a prison, molded by the darkness, as that now famous line in The Dark Knight Rises would state. Both versions show the loyalty of Bane's army, as they all continue to support his plan no matter what, even if they die for it. Both versions show Bane having an appreciation for the artistic, with Bane appreciating the beautiful voice of the football game in The Dark Knight Rises, and Bane appreciating the fantasy of books in his origin. And both versions, as stated earlier, showcase both his physical power and his mental strength. Throughout his origin, Bane is shown to be a complex and intelligent character, one with almost a heroic nature to him, where throughout everything, his will and his ability to stand by his beliefs is unmatched. He's a natural leader and a true threat to anyone, not just Batman. He's the kind of man who could lead an army or destroy one single-handedly. Just look at that description and try to apply it to most popular versions of the character. You really can't. But really, that image of Bane just being another roided up meathead might be one that is a bit too easy for writers to come to. And that may be because of one specific thing that is normally linked with Bane that is actually not in The Dark Knight Rises. His venom. That's right, venom. The drug that has probably created this overly massive and disgustingly meaty portrayal of Bane in your mind. This chemical that has turned Bane from a character that many people could see as an intelligent combatant into just a giant, thick muscle of a man that has no brain to go along with all that power. But, like I mentioned earlier, in The Dark Knight Rises, there is no mention of venom whatsoever. And perhaps they made the smartest decision they could by just scrapping the venom entirely from the movie. You see, without Venom, the writers of this movie were forced to actually give a shit about Bane. Instead of there being just some dumb, drug-enhanced, and ultimately overused battle between the Caped Crusader and this monster, Bane is forced to rely on his expert strategy, his natural strength, and his master plan to try and beat Batman. Hell, I would argue that Bane did defeat Batman in a sense. By the end of the movie, Batman's mystique was completely destroyed. Batman, in the eyes of the public, had died, and Bane did what he set out to do. He gave Gotham back to the people, with its citizens no longer able to rely on this mysterious protector, wondering if he was still out there to save them. Now, the people of Gotham must truly realize that this is their city to fight back against. Bane burned the hope of Gotham down, metaphorically, so Gotham could rise up and start to fend for itself once again. We watched as Bane set out this goal for himself before ultimately using his mind to accomplish that goal. Bane, throughout The Dark Knight Rises, had a somewhat logical reason for everything that he did. He trapped the police officers underground so that his plan couldn't be thwarted. He exposed Jim Gordon and this big Harvey Dent-related lie so that he could convince Gotham citizens of the police corruption. He brought Batman to this seemingly inescapable prison to not only send a message, but to also make sure Batman couldn't interrupt his plan all the way back in Gotham. And he handily took this nuclear bomb from Wayne Enterprises to move forward with his plan, knowing that he had Talia al Ghul on the inside for help. And all of this was done because Bane was forced to act creatively. Bane was forced to use his army, his will, and his strategy to try and create a revolution within Gotham. You know, as opposed to the typical version of Bane that we're sadly so often used to seeing. One where he just relies on his venom and his overall physical strength. Interestingly enough, when comparing the versions of Bane throughout most popular shows and movies, it's this version of Bane that does the most amount of damage. Not the versions that just rely on his strength, but this version of Bane that conquers Batman psychologically. Hell, the only reason he loses is because a weakened Bruce Wayne did what Bane seemingly deemed impossible. Really? It's not because Bruce outsmarted Bane. It's because Bruce had help to do the seemingly impossible. He had Catwoman, Lucius, and Alfred all still there willing to help him after Bruce escaped the seemingly inescapable prison. So, at the end of the day, perhaps this version of Bane could end up becoming an interesting template for the character in the future. And maybe, just maybe, this version of Bane could end up becoming a bit of an inspiration for all of you. Value your intelligence above all else. Because, as Bane himself would show you, that is what truly matters. It doesn't matter how much physical strength you may have, because it's your knowledge that will ultimately become your greatest weapon. Thank you all so much for watching this quick character dissection of Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me that The Dark Knight Rises depicts the best version of Bane in popular media? Let me know down in the comments, but until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.